So let's come together and share any lessons around what to you can draw from this in terms of effective partnering. And if you are seeking, many of you I know have partnerships already, but if you are seeking to expand partnerships, who would you seek, or what kind of things would you look for as you again learn from these lessons? So what to you are the kind of the lessons about effective partnering here that you want to share? Yes.
My name is Simi Rodriguez. I'm from the Northwest, Washington State. The lesson I learned today, is beyond me. I have no relationship as far as research goes, so this is brand new to me. And I know Washington State is part of this project, of all this knowledge, but why didn't I hear about this? So the lesson that I learned from you two, and all of you in this, the determination you have. Your heart, you determine that there is a need in your community. For me, the knowledge you have, you're given, it's tremendous. And for me as a leader, that's the part I lack. And since I don't know anything about this, I will continue to pursue, because I know it is also need in the community I live. And the knowledge I gained today, and I will look to the UW and get those people out. I need knowledge. I need that so that I can serve the community better. And thank you for the great presentation.
Determination, absolutely determination. Other lessons, yeah.
One of the things that keeps striking me all 3 days, but you all in particular, so your presentation was very thorough, so I really appreciated that. What strikes me is when academia gets the notion of community organizing, that's what makes a partnership seem to really gel. And when academia tries to be triumphalistic about the research over against community organizing, I think those tensions become more difficult to build the trust. But I'm just watching you two watch each other as you were doing your presentations. It's clear admiration for each other because you bring so much to the table together. And there's something about the way in which you both appreciate each other's strengths that is, I think, what makes this partnership, at least it looks like makes this partnership work in ways that I don't see other partnerships.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your comment too. I did just want to give a shout out to Mary Mankler, who left the room, and I think we'll be back soon. But we had huge, tremendous partners from all of from the community certainly, and I think we highlight that because of the theme today, and because it just was an amazing process. But the leadership that Mary provided. She teaches a community organizing class at the School of Public Health at UC Berkeley. So certainly there's this, certainly she's a full supporter of community organizing, and the kind of flexibility that you have to build in and that academics have to be comfortable with in a project like this is tremendous. And Mary, really set the stage for that. Even though she had to be responsible for meeting timelines and deliverables, she knew that it was absolutely important for the community to take the leadership and to take the time at the beginning. And she, in turn, sort of led in her very quiet, unassuming, but very powerful way, some of the academic and other partners, to support that. And this came out in the evaluation was that the leadership role of the PI and the example that was set was absolutely critical. So I just wanted to mention that, sort of the quieter sort of part of the presentation, but that was certainly always there.
And I want to really, what you just raised was so important in terms of getting the academic side, and trust and respect and humility. So when we were starting this project, I brought Mary down and we walked through Chinatown, and we went to the housing projects, and I introduced her to the different people in the housing projects. When we walked in, we talked, and it was sizing up in terms of, her body language, how she understood things, how she engaged with the tenants in the housing project, and was very respectful. But that's really important to really engage it. The other was with Dr. Krause, Nicholas Krause, bringing him down and meeting the workers, and how he would talk and communicate, and talking about a situation around a question or something with the staff, making sure that, you can tell by body language and how people raise their voice or different things, and how posed it. These are things that you might not think are important, but they're really important in terms of the academic side.
And we will have the chance also to hear from Meredith Mickler tomorrow morning, so be sure to be here, and you'll see her talk about policy and advocacy and the kind of change that she's very interested in terms of research. Other thoughts on lessons or how you engage partners or think about expanding your partnerships, given again some of these lessons? Yeah.
Well, we really appreciated how you involved the workers all the way through, but we wondered what your purpose was. It was really interesting, but what the purpose was in asking people what their perceptions were ahead of time, where they thought the 90%, the 40%, and then they found out it was 8%. How did you use those results, or why were you doing that?
I think it's, in terms of learning and education, is that we don't, there's the approach, you could just pour the information into people's heads, right, and then they learn it, and then they take from it. I developed the activity in that way to engage people in critical thinking, to have them think through the process for themselves of what they think it would be, and then be able to understand then the actual data result, and then to critically think and discuss with each other, why that result was what it was. And so by doing that, we were able to generate then much quicker and with more depth, questions that they'd say, well then, can you ask Dr. Krause to tell us, in terms of how it was broken down in gender? I want to know, because their probably perception was different than what the actual thing was. And so it was really generated more analysis, more in-depth understanding. So there's this one question in terms of being yelled and screamed at, right? Were you being yelled and screamed at? And so they ranked it very high. Oh yeah, everybody's yelled and screamed at every day in the restaurants, right? So they thought it would be in the 90s. Well, it wasn't. It was maybe 60 or something like that, was low. And they looked at that and they go, what? How come it's so low? Everybody's getting yelled and screamed at. And I said, well, let's talk about it. And talk. And then they talked with each other. And then it came back to us. We feel that this number reflects the point at which you want to cry.
Oh, wow.
Because everybody gets yelled and screamed at. And some you just absorb. But this reflects in terms of, when you just can't take it anymore, and you're gonna lose sleep, you're gonna take it home and take it out on your family, or you're gonna cry. And so we asked them to take that back to other people to test, and that was affirmed. So that's what was able to be generated.
I actually have two thoughts just to add to that. There's a real difference in a Freudian popular education way of the use of a term called problem posing. It's allowing the participants, the staff, whoever, to pose problems rather than telling information. And it's a completely different educational model. It's the opposite of what we're supposed to do as academics, which is tell information. So the idea of creating opportunities to pose problems so people can critically think is very much built into popular education. That's what it's all about. So just think of that term, how am I going to create a dialogue here where together we're posing these problems of how do we interpret this data? What do we suppose it is? What's surprising to us? Those are problem posing questions. And that's a really different educational process. So that's one thought just to add to what Pam and Charlotte are saying. The other is that I think the idea of really co-interpretation of data is so critical to CVPR because the understanding of the data would be completely different if the workers didn't give their perspective. If in fact it was only the academics or the Department of Health people who went back and said, oh, okay, now we know it's 70%, that's what we know. And they just take the data on face value, then you don't get the richness of understanding. And so I think the participatory CVPR actually can create more valid research results with that collaborative interpretation and trying to understand what it is, or even trying to, people also have the wrong perspective sometimes. And so they have to challenge themselves. Did we really understand that? Did we not? So, yeah.
So you started the presentation with Europeans, but I assume there was a lot of work that happened before that to come together, to identify this as a problem you wanted to work on together. You talked a little bit about that. Could you talk more about the beginning and the early phases?
This, going to the issue of conditions of restaurant workers, was part of, in terms of the organization, the Chinese Progressive Association, was during the 90s. And bringing together all the workers, we might have about 100 workers engaged in discussions back in 2000. Okay. And that is where we asked, what are the main issues that are facing that you feel that needs to be addressed right now? And the first one was around employment, because our members were mainly garment workers, and those jobs went overseas, right? And so one of the first things that we did was around retraining and plant closure issues and things like that. And so we worked and developed with the city a program to help train and place people. So now when you go to General Hospital or other places, the airport, you will see women cleaning, right? And they were former garment workers. And so that was one of the issues. The second issue that came up was what was happening in Chinatown with restaurant workers. So once that was set aside, then the second priority on the list was dealing with issues of restaurant workers. And so this kind of has an origin back to like 2000. And so there was a lot of discussion, and so I had a couple of years to percolate that and discuss talking with different people, and we had a conversation with Mary Minkler. One of those things where you see somebody over lunch and you're talking and, well, this is what's happening, and Mary goes, oh, and that's how things flow. Does that answer your question, sort of?
I'll just add, so I think Nita mentioned this at the beginning, but Pam was a founding board member of CPA, and she was at LOHP at the university while this project was happening, but the entire time you've been actively involved with CPA as a board member and in the community. Pam is a lifelong San Francisco resident. You lived in Chinatown as a little girl. So, you know, she has deep roots. And so, you know, I think we were really advantaged in having, you know, these really strong ties between Pam at the university and a CPA in the community, and then LOHP is kind of a bridging organization within the School of Public Health. And so Pam had strong ties to the researchers and had previously worked with Mary and Nicholas Krauss and others. And so we were really building off a very, you know, I think, good, strong network of ties, but that still needed to be built even more and sort of brought together in the form of a partnership. But I think that was really, really key.
Okay, maybe one more, or two more.
Just following along on the same theme in your origins, I'm just curious as to the role of the Department of Public Health or their emergence as a partner. Was that from the very beginning when you were having these conversations, or did that grow out of some of your aims that you had?
So over coffee and talking with Mary, I had been involved in a food inspection tour. And no, I had been involved in a tour of the restaurants. I wanted to see what was going on in these Chinese restaurants. And my friend is a fire inspector. So he says, "You want to get in? I'll take you in." And so we went into the restaurants, and I'm looking around there, and I'm like, wow, this, you know, there's all kinds of stuff happening in here. And we couldn't really pursue it in terms of the fire inspection. But he goes, "Well, you know who else comes in here is food inspectors." I go, "Oh, really?" And then kind of like talk to Mary about getting in there and learning more about and food inspections. And possibly, I've just come back from LA where they have A, B, C, D ratings of the restaurants there. I said, wow, you know, that could be good. We were just kind of talking. And then, lo and behold, Mary goes, I know people at the food safety. And then it just kind of made a trip over there and talked to them about the potential, and then that was kind of started it all. You want to add to that?
So have coffee with potential partners.
You know, going back to the question of your approach to getting people to evaluate numbers or to guess at figures before they're revealed, I imagine that you anticipated on some level that you were going to get data or like help in validity through this process. And I'm just wondering, so I can see that there's a way to write for the IRB so you get to use this data. Did you run into times where, because you hadn't anticipated something that the IRB just prevented you from using something?
Want to answer, Mary?
I'm sorry, I just wanted back in.
This is an IRB question, Mary. Yeah. So the IRB definitely was a challenge. Less so in the data analysis, I think, part of things, but certainly in the instrument design and the data collection pieces, we were sort of evolving a process and trying to figure out how is it going to happen that community members are going to go out, interview folks, maintain confidentiality, at the same time, you know, be able to track the stipends that we're giving out. At the same time, being able to try and make the connections in the community and build, you know, start building some of this this energy and movement for the change that they were seeing coming up. And so there were definitely, I think, a lot. We went through a couple of amendments, I think, with the full committee of the IRB. On the processes and the procedures for laying out the procedure or the data collection. process. And all of these had to be translated into Chinese too. And so for each round of amendments, everything had to be translated into Chinese, which takes more time and more cost. Meanwhile, you're trying to keep the momentum of the workers up, and they want to get out there. They've developed this thing. Want to get out there? We got to submit this thing. It's got to be approved. Wait, there's some questions that we have to address within these protocols. We've got to fix it because this university committee over there has some things to say. So we did have quite a lot of. We spent a lot of time on it, and we had several, I think, very long meetings around that. Mary, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add.
I don't know if I can be heard from back here. Can you hear me?
We're getting a microphone.
Yeah, for those of you interested, Phil Brown and Rachel Morella-Frosch wrote a very beautiful, strong article on IRB challenges in CVPR using a case study. Ours could have been a similar one. And I think one of the things that really hurt me most was when we were well into the project and all real excited about it. I mentioned or came up with at a meeting, gee, do you think we might want to do another study together someday? And Shasan, who's been referred to many times, our main contact at CPA, said no, and she mentioned the IRB and said that was so stressful, I never want to go through that again. So, for people who have long-standing partnerships, if you can do an IRB, and if you have an IRB-friendly university, that's great. But for this kind of thing, it can really be problematic, and I felt very badly that it did cost us, I think, the possibility of future research.
And what were the authors again?
Oh, Phil Brown and Rachel Morella-Frosch. And it's in the journal Environmental Perspectives. And it's on a case study of IRB problems in CVPR.
Can I just add one more thing to that? So as with, a very consistent theme was creating opportunities out of the research to do some reflection, and they definitely, Pam and Shasan and folks at CPA definitely took advantage of the IRB training process to reflect on, why are we even going through this? I showed, the explanation worksheet, but even before that, there was this whole conversation about why do we have an IRB? And so then you start talking about Tuskegee, you start talking about Nuremberg, and you get into the history of some of the really painful, sort of abuses of research, that have happened. And so why is it so important to protect workers? And then they were able to use that as, an opportunity for critical reflection, on people, immigrants coming over from China. World War II is fresh for them, in their family histories. And so they were thinking about the World War II and the Japanese invasion and experiences that they knew happened in their families. And so they were drawing connections between their own experiences as well. And so it actually did turn into also an opportunity in addition to some added steps.
I just want to add one more thing. The IRB, one of our work staff, she's monolingual Chinese speaker. She had to take the test online. And that was quite an experience in terms of reading, you've taken the test. What is that test?
CITI.
So she had to do, so we had to have a translator, an interpreter there, and to read the whole thing, she had to understand it and study. It took a really long time. They demanded that she take that test.
I just wanted to ask, I think this topic of engaging community health workers or community workers or community members in the research process, I think brings up a lot of issues around conflict of interest and also protection of human subjects. And having a session to go into that in more detail would be, I think, helpful.
Yeah, I'm thinking that this, including IRB, there's been a lot of different talk about IRB, that one of our Friday sessions should be on this involvement of community partners in being active research partners, and that influences the IRB or the IRB influences that. And there's more than just IRB there, but let's do that on Friday. That would be useful.
I have something that's kind of a follow-on from Julia's question about IRB. And part of it is, it sounds like the survey definitely went through IRB as an instrument, but I'm wondering about, like, for example, your training units. It sounds like you're writing about what happened there and you're using data from that to bolster the evidence from the survey. So did you actually include in the IRB all of your meetings? Like, you played some recording. Was that recording, did people consent to editing? Like, just all of that stuff, I guess.
So what happened was that we had included that piece in the protocol, and the IRB actually told us to take it out, that they did not consider it research. And because they were staff, effectively research team staff who were involved. What we still did was, with all of the data that we've collected, we still did our own informed consent process. So before the interviews, kind of telling people this is purely voluntary, you can stop anytime. We won't be using any words and putting them with your name, or if we do, we're going to run them by you. And that's generally what we've done, is that we've kind of run quotes by people and gotten their permission. And so yeah, that was how it was handled.
I do think across the country, the IRB experience is really varied. And we're all educating our IRBs about all kinds of needs from CBPR partnerships, from the fact of just saying we're going to develop, we can't give you our instrument because we're co-developing it. And so then you know that you're coming in for an amendment once the instrument is developed, to the fact of, who's going to be doing the data collection, where you're going to be adding co-investigators from the community workers, and so they need to do city training, the IRB training on confidentiality. So there's the fact that CBPR is a given that there will be multiple amendments to, in my experience, in IRBs, and it's how friendly those committees are, or understanding the chairs are that these are in fact processes rather than an IRB application that's done. I mean, I think this other question of, is the data in discussion part of the data? I've personally never been questioned by that, by the IRB, and we've always included it. So I don't know if other people, that's another question to have a discussion on, whether that's in fact an issue for some IRBs or not. So I think that there, again, we're in a process as a science, as a discipline, or as a group of people working in this field, needing to educate our university IRBs. Some universities get educated easier around data sharing when they're working with tribes, because the tribes demand it. So that's and a lot of universities who don't deal with tribes don't get educated on that. And so it really is an important set of questions. So I do want to say that in the partnership development story that's been happening, or the many different lessons, that I think that hopefully we can take these lessons to our own partnerships as we think who we are, who we're working with, how we might want to expand it. I think there's a lot of serendipityness around partnerships sometimes. You do meet the right people at the right time, or you've had a personal relationship, like Pam was talking about with Mary, and then over coffee kind of saying, well, should we move forward with this core issue that comes out of Pam's experience, and are you interested in your next phase of your career taking this on? So that's also very real, that we build on our relationships. The idea of having bridges, Charlotte said this, Pam was both an employee at the university through the Labor Occupational Health Program at part of the School of Public Health, as well as a longtime resident and organizer within Chinatown, gave her that capacity to be a bridge. And so that kind of who we're working with and our staffing, and so those are really important kind of considerations around how to best navigate some of these relationships. The individual personal relationships are not sufficient. You have to also build in the structures of participation and the next steps together and how you expect to work together, but they can be a really solid, important base. So hopefully, I think there's a lot of learnings here, so thank you. Did you want to make any final comments, either of you?
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we do have lunch, and then we come back to our case studies at 1 p.m. And where are they today? They are back in the library. So people were there yesterday.